and I did costume for Loserville.
Hi, I'm Grace, and I did props for Loserville.
Hi, I'm Meg, and I also did props for the musical Loserville.
So, what do you feel your main goal was for this unit, this project?
I feel like my main goal was to try and stay on task and complete the props in the actual deadline that we were given. Meg?
I think my main goal was, to learn more about how some props are made and stuff, because this is my first time being in the props department for a show. So I think learning about sort of different materials that are used and how to use certain tools and stuff like that, I think was probably one of my main goals.
For me, I think it was making sure I completed everything in like a timely manner, like hitting all my deadlines, and also so far I've only really done makes. I haven't really been in charge of anything, so from like an organizational standpoint, that was quite what I wanted to figure out how to do. And yeah, how do you feel your research helped you with this project?
I feel like research helped quite a lot, because it was based in like the 70s. You had to look at more aspects, like it wasn't just for costumes. Say like props had to be more to date, such as the envelopes, which had to be a certain size to fit the time, as well as other aspects. Meg?
Same as you really. The whole research, obviously, as you said, the show was set in the 70s, so we had to make sure that everything had looked like it was from the right time period. Like the badminton rackets, for example, we were aiming to look for just older style ones. It was similar for, I think, almost all props looked different than they would have today. So I think the research definitely helped us to learn how to.
So it was I wasn't expecting there to be as much of a difference as there was.
Me
what you were
neither.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I really considered how different it was.
Yeah, because first going into it, when I looked at the props list we made, I was like, oh yeah, we could do this, and this. And then I actually thought about, oh wait, no, it's in the 70s. There's actually quite a lot of difference, more than I was expecting, like
stuff
you said.
Like bags as well, trying to find them so they'd fit the time as well.
Like you said, simple things like the bags and the envelopes and the badminton rackets, all and the phone was all very different. So yeah, that was definitely something we all had to consider quite carefully, I think.
Yeah, and I think it was the same for my role as well. I had to think about how it looked and maybe what the styles were. I found it more difficult that it was set in America as well, that I had to look into that a lot more, and it was harder because I couldn't. At first I thought I could ask the people around me who were around in the 70s, but they're all British, so that didn't really work. Something also I had to look at a lot was like the sci-fi convention. I was like looking at the old aliens and spaceships, because it's changed quite a lot. It's evolved, and I actually thought it'd be a lot less. Like I didn't think they'd have dressed up as much as they did, but like looking at the photos from actual sci-fi conventions they had then, they really went for it. Possibly more than they did now. Like some of them really like well done as well.
Yeah, because if you were to look at like one of like today's like sci-fi or comic book conventions, even though they are very similar in the sense of like everybody dresses up and everything, obviously in the 70s they will have dressed up from movies in the 70s or TV programs from the 70s, and even though in those movies lots of stuff does look futuristic, it still looks like it's from the 70s in a way.
Yeah, I was surprised because I watched Star Trek to help me, like visualize everything, and I was surprised at how bare the consoles were, and also what they were wearing, like their space costumes was very minimal, and that was enough. And then now we have like all massive buttons everywhere, like all the bells and whistles. Yeah. They didn't so much. It was a lot more.
Yeah, it's quite simplistic, but quite effective. I think.
I found everything was quite patterned as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of pattern
and like bright colours.
Yeah, especially when it came to things like the packing bag and the handbag and stuff. That sort of, especially the packing bag, I think, was quite patterned, like sort of floral.
Yeah. Loserville as a show was very bright and colourful.
Yeah, definitely.
Very loud.
Yeah, so again, like all of that had to be considered because the sort of style of the show was quite cartoonish and comic book styled. So especially with the props, they all had to be considered, and lots of them were sort of made bigger or had more
Oversized and
emphasis on
colourful,
sort of
yeah.
stuff and made it a lot, like you said, a lot more colourful. So that sort of comic book style had to be researched, as well as making it look time accurate, also making it look like it was from some kind of comic book or graphic novel or something like that.
What worked the best that you did? What was like your favourite thing?
I feel like I very much enjoyed working backstage. That's always like my favourite thing. I enjoyed doing all the scene changes, but I think making wise, I quite enjoyed doing the Starship with Meg. It was like a nice,
That was
big
fun.
project
Yeah.
because it's so different to things like we've done before. It's just meant to still look homemade, which is not very like normal.
Yeah,
for
I
props.
found that a bit difficult, kind of having to switch that off in your brain. Like, no, it's
Yeah.
supposed to look bad.
Yeah, because obviously we were used to having to make props and make it look like an actual thing.
Yeah.
Whether, like you said, with the Starship, it was allowed to be sort of a little bit messy, like intentionally,
Yeah.
because it was in the show a homemade thing.
I feel like that worked. Like, I think that worked very well. But I also think like the communication between us two for props was good as well.
Definitely.
We always knew who was doing what,
Yeah.
and if someone needed help, like
Yeah,
worked
I think
well.
it definitely helped that we made that list in the beginning and sort of split the smaller job roles so we could focus on our own things and get the obviously process done quicker. But then with those bigger jobs, we worked together on them.
They worked good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed backstage. Operating the slide panels was really fun, something completely new to me. So I did really enjoy that. But in terms of makes, personally, I really enjoyed making the comic book that was made by Lucas and the computer magazine. Especially the comic book, because I have a lot of comic books in the house, so I sort of know how they're supposed to look, but also making sure it looks time accurate as well. And again, making it look somewhat homemade, because obviously in the show, Lucas made it himself. So sort of like designing the cover and everything, I researched like the older comic books and sort of how they looked. I had to look at different sort of like stamps and logos or stuff that may be on some of the comic books, and I think that worked really well for me. I was definitely sort of in my element doing that, and I did enjoy. So I think that worked really well. And as you said, Grace, the sort of communication between the both of us, especially when it came to working together, like on the Starship, for example, we both like sort of communicated our plan beforehand, and even when we had to change it in between, we were very good at sort of organising ourselves together. So I think that for us worked really well.
Yeah, for me, I'd say like in the actual performance week, I enjoyed doing the quick changes a lot. Especially the really fast ones. It was quite stressful, but when we got it right, it was very satisfying to finally like probably get them on there. In the process and like in terms of makes, Samantha's UFO dress was probably the most fun. It required quite a lot of problem solving, which I think I quite enjoyed. It was something I had to really think about because it's such a strange material to work with, using like insulation. It's not something you really think of. So there was quite a few like testing it out and feeling how it moved, what kind of structure it could hold, was really like fascinating. I think I learned a lot from it.
Yeah, it looked very cool as well. In all fairness.
So I remember seeing you bring in the materials. I was like, that's interesting. And then I sort of blinked and turned around and suddenly you made it into a skirt, and it was awesome.
I was especially putting it in the machine. I was quite concerned about because I wasn't sure if it would just disintegrate. It actually sewed really smoothly, which was lucky. Don't know what I would have done if it didn't. But it was because we couldn't use foil, because foil would just break the minute you put it in a machine. And it held up through all the shows, which I was surprised about. But I'm glad it held up that long. What do you think could have been improved, or would you have done differently?
I think definitely for me is time management and organisation. I'm so bad at keeping organised, especially with like, I don't know, making sure stuff's done in a timely manner. I think I could definitely improve on that next time, and probably communication backstage. I think there was lots of like, it was very difficult to communicate, especially as the people doing scene changes didn't have comms. So we were having to communicate through people, which makes it harder, especially people moving about. And if it's dark, you can't really see who's who. So I think definitely that for me was hard. But Meg?
I think for me, even though I am a lot more comfortable in obviously the environment that is our workspace, now there are still moments where if I'm using like a new material or a new tool or whatever it is, I still have those moments where I like to figure it out by myself, but if I get to a point where I still don't know what I'm doing, I do struggle with asking people, like, how is this used? How can I use it? Can you like give me a hand? Because I want to be able to figure it out by myself, and sometimes I do, and that's great. But also I need to sort of learn that it is okay if I don't know, because at the end of the day, I'm here to learn, and that's what asking does. Asking people to help makes you be able to learn things, and that's, like I said, that's why I'm here. So it's just sort of that, just to have to keep reminding myself it's okay to ask those questions. I'm allowed to not know things, and just trying to build that confidence. And I have gotten a lot better since the first show we did. I think my confidence has definitely grown, but I still do have those moments where I'm like, I need to sort of push myself a little bit more. What about you, Maya?
I feel that I do think my organisation skills like developed a lot throughout this project, but I think there's still a lot I could do better. Especially, we found when we were doing the fitting for one of the sci-fi conventions that we'd missed out 2 people, which was quite like oh no. And I think there was quite a few times like that. I think it's probably because I'd get quite overwhelmed by just how much there was, and instead of just writing the list or maybe talking to someone about it, I'd just get more and more confused. So I think I really need to like work on just getting it out of my head so it makes sense, so we don't have situations.
I think
like
it being
that.
double cast really made it harder as well.
Yes, especially because they didn't match up all the time, and we had several different pairings, which meant some people did fall through the cracks, and we didn't quite catch everyone.
Yeah, I suppose especially when it comes to costume, that's quite something you really got to focus on. Because obviously with props, we can make one prop and like everybody can use it. It's not a problem. But obviously with costume, you got to make sure that obviously certain things fit multiple people potentially.
Yeah, I did have some trouble with that with Samantha's skirt. Was they were both quite different sizes, so it was trying to figure out a way to make it fit them both, because I didn't really have enough to make 2 of them, or the time really. I didn't want to be spending that much time doing it, so I ended up just putting 2 poppers in separate places so it could be tightened. But I didn't love that, because then you could see the other popper. So I'd have liked to maybe explored some other options of making it adjustable, because it maybe wasn't the best, but it was functional. How well do you feel you took on board feedback for this project?
I don't feel like I took feedback on very well. I'm very much like defensive if someone gives me feedback, but I feel like it's definitely something I've done better on this time, and I'll like actually listen to someone if I ask them something or they offer help, because at the end of the day we're all here to learn, so we need to be able to take on feedback. So it's definitely
it's a skill to learn as well, isn't it, to be able to,
because they're only trying to help. It's not like a personal thing. So I think for me,
it is quite easy to take it personally sometimes, even if you know they didn't mean it that way. It can be quite easy to sort of become upset by it.
What about you?
Overall, I think I took feedback pretty well. I feel I was able to sort of adjust the way I did some things based on what other people had told me. However, there were some moments where the feedback I was given came to me a bit too late. So like perhaps I had finished or was almost finished making a prop, and then I was given feedback saying, or something like, you could have done it like this, or you should have used this material. And while that's great for future reference, now that I know that, there were times when it frustrated me because I'd already finished what I was doing and I didn't have enough time to make another better version of whatever I was making. So there were times where I did get a little overwhelmed and frustrated with some people in terms of like when they were giving me feedback. The feedback itself, I think I took well. It's just sort of the timing for me. But overall, I think I managed pretty well. Like I said, there were times where I could take that feedback on board and adjust the way I was doing some things. What about you, Maya?
I think I did better taking the feedback actually during the shows. Like when Jo, our production manager, I think she is, but when she was saying things like add elastic to the headbands so it doesn't fall off, things like that, which were actually really useful, because I hadn't thought of that, and they just kept on falling off.
Yeah.
But I think maybe I might have misunderstood some pieces of feedback, so I didn't quite do it properly, or like what they had in mind, and then we ended up having to redo some things. So I think maybe I need to ask for more clarification when I'm giving feedback, because then I think in my head, oh, I know what they're talking about, and then I go and do it, and that was not what they meant at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe something I need to work on a bit with that. How was your organisation and time management skills?
I think I think at some points it was okay. It's better than it has been in other productions I've done, 100%. But there's definitely still room for improvement on my part. Because although we did hit deadlines, we also had stuff added on for props, which made it a lot harder to keep to the deadline.
Yeah.
But then again, that's not our fault. But there's definitely areas where I think I could have completed props a lot sooner had I organised myself more.
Yeah.
100%. I know that though.
Yeah.
Nice.
I feel, in terms of organisation, I think I did pretty well, and I think as a props department we did pretty well, because especially at the beginning, you know, we'd went through the script, we wrote out a list, we divided the work between us. When more stuff was added, we divided that between us as well. So I think in general organisation, I think we did pretty well, and me personally, I think I was able to manage pretty well. In terms of time management, I don't think it was too bad, although there definitely is room for improvement there. Although I feel majority of that was the fact that I didn't realise how long certain things were going to take. Like with the Starship, for example, we were asked to make sure because it was made using cardboard, we were asked to reinforce the cardboard just to make sure it withstood the whole week of the shows. And I didn't realise, because I hadn't used the materials before, how long it was going to take to reinforce it, let everything that was needed to dry before we could start painting it and constructing it. So in that sense, it did take, there were parts that took longer than I was expecting, but also it wasn't necessarily because I had put it off or because I'd forgotten about it or anything like that. It was just a case of I didn't realise how long it was going to take. However, there were moments when I had procrastinated some jobs because I was either nervous about it or not 100% confident with what I was doing. So there's, like you said, there's definitely room for improvement there, I think, as a whole of the props department, time management. But in terms of organisation, I think we handled ourselves pretty well. What about you, Maya?
I think I struggled quite a lot with like my action plan and setting myself the deadlines, because I really struggled to work out how long something will take me. I mean, like you were just saying, I don't have a great concept of how long things take to make. So I'll be like, oh, I can make that in an hour, and that will take me 2 days. And then the thing that I thought would take me 2 days takes me 5 minutes, and the other thing takes me 2 weeks. So I think I really need to like properly think about, critically think about how long something's going to take me.
I think so also using new materials as well, it's quite easy to sort of under or overestimate stuff like that.
It's definitely. I found that with like the tools that I made from the wood, I didn't realise how long that would take.
Yeah.
Because you have to draw it out. I thought it would be like 2-minute job, like do like a quick job.
Yeah.
Like it maybe take me a couple of hours, and it took me about 2-3 days, because then try and paint as well. But like you said, costume is hit and miss.
Yeah. How well do you feel you work with the rest of the team? I feel like you've kind of answered that already.
I feel like we've, like as a props department, we definitely worked well. Like communication was very clear on who was doing what. I think, well, same with backstage. I think it was okay, but it was very hard to communicate from stage left to stage right. Scene changes for the people who were doing that, purely because we didn't have enough comms.
I
but
did feel that because I was switching between stage left and stage right for different changes.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of.
I feel like it was very like a grey area, but then again, there wasn't a lot we could do, and I think we coped well with the situation that we were put in, especially with like if there's a problem backstage, such as we had issues with the band and their monitors, and that got communicated really well. So as a whole, like production team, as like a company, I think we worked well with what happened.
I think the circumstances were just what they were.
Yeah.
Your situation backstage, and you were just coping with it, which you did very well. But that was just what you had to do. There wasn't really a lot. It wasn't avoidable.
Yeah, there was no way to avoid some issues we had. But then again, I think everyone worked really well, just to keep it together.
Definitely, I think, like you said, there were some issues that were kind of unavoidable, unfortunately, but that does happen. But I think we all sort of collected ourselves and managed to work together pretty well to overcome some of these problems. Because, like you were saying, as a props department, I think our communication on our teamwork was amazing, quite frankly. In terms of communicating between departments, we worked really closely with our DSM, because they did assist with some of our prop making when they weren't in rehearsals. And then obviously we went up to rehearsals together, and they helped us to learn the scene changes and when the slide panels would be moving in and out. And then, as you said, during the show backstage, there were some issues in terms of, like you said, communicating between stage left and stage right, as you were on stage left and I was on stage right. But luckily, because I was on the slide panels, I was on comms all the time. So if there was an issue, I was able to help communicate it to the other people who were doing the scene changes who didn't have comms. And there were moments backstage where an issue had turned up, where maybe it was a prop was lost, or we needed a chair and a computer set from the other side of stage. We were able to work together. I was able to communicate to you on comms that we needed one over, and somebody from my side would either come grab it, or somebody from your side would come bring it over. So I feel overall, I think there was great teamwork, especially when it came to the get in and the get out of the show. We all worked fantastically together. I think we all communicated really well in terms of what was being put where in the vans, because we had 2 separate vans for the get out. So I think in that sense, I think we all worked fantastically together.
Yeah, it worked really well.
And I think it also helps that we've all become quite a close-knit group of friends quite quickly. And I think that really does help in terms of being comfortable with communicating with each other, especially in situations like the get in and the get out.
Definitely. What do you think, Maya?
Well, for the shows, I had one other member of costume, and I think maybe I could have communicated what I needed better to them, because there were some points where maybe I'd need them and they weren't there, but maybe I needed to communicate better that I needed them there beforehand. I needed them to be around. Maybe more so than I did. I think in terms of the actual changes, I organised them quite well. I feel like the people I was doing it with, we communicated what we needed each person to do quite well, and with the actor as well, because like for Eddie's Darth Vader change, I got the actor and the crew who were going to assist me to try it, so then we all knew what was happening, and I also got the other actor to watch it happen in the show, so he knew what to expect as well, because he decided he didn't want to rehearse it. I wanted him to know what was going to happen. And I think that really helped us with that.
I think it was also good with quick changes, because you were on the other side for some of them, that you brought them in the script we had on stage left. So it was really good, communicated through. It made it work for us, because we were aware, even if it was on the other side, that we could help out
I
and
also
do something else.
Wrote up 2 lists of all the costume changes and who was on them, and I put it on both sides of stage. I might not have told you, which is an oversight of my communication. I probably should have told you it was there. But instead of doing an individual one, because I'm not sure if everybody knew when something's changing. So it's just like a master document for everyone to know.
Because that way, if somebody was available on a certain side, they could come help you if
and
needed.
if I wasn't in, then that would be there, and everybody would know what was happening. So every time something changed, I would write it in, because I couldn't guarantee that I'd be there the next day. I mean, I'd hope I would. If you get hit by a car. How well do you feel you problem solved?
I feel like problem solving wise, I think was really good, especially when we were in show week, because we had a lot of issues come up, generally with across the board, really. Scene changes, quick changes, lighting, sound, everything. We all had issues, and that was going to be expected, because we only had 2 days of tech, and some people hadn't worked on the production at all. So I feel like problem solving wise was really good. Some people were completely going into the shows completely blind. So I think like you said, overall problem solving, I think we managed pretty well. It's there were some situations, I think as we mentioned beforehand, with the band's monitors, they couldn't get any sort of sound through, so we were able to work together to sort of communicate that back to our DSM, who was in the back of the box with our lighting technician.
So I think we problem solved that quite well, and we worked together really
Definitely.
well. And there were some situations during the making stage of there were some props that we, like the starship, for example, we didn't really have a clear idea of how we were going to make it going into it. It was, for that prop in particular, a case of kind of figuring it out on the job, because it needed to be done, and we didn't really have much more time to just sit down and think about it. So it was a case of, we found our materials, we had a design plan, we started to cut out our shapes and what parts we needed, and there was a bit of problem solving in terms of how we would attach it to the trolley, and how we would attach the cardboard to each other and stuff like that.
That was definitely a hard one. Problem solving, I feel like it's a good attribute to have, especially in this industry.
Yes, definitely.
Because you're always on the job. Like, it's always
for every role, I think it's important to be able to problem solve.
Yeah.
I think, the first one that comes to mind was the stormtrooper's legs in the show kept on coming undone.
Yeah.
And I tried hand sewing it several times, and it did not work. And I couldn't sew the top of the hem directly up, like into, because I'd rolled it up and I'd pulled it up. I couldn't sew that round because the leg was smaller than the rest of the leg, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it would just like cinch in and bunch it up and make it look quite ugly. So in the end, I used my sewing machine to sew just on two sides, just to hold it there, because the hand sewing, every time they stuck their foot in, it would snap, which meant when they were actually going on stage, it was undone. But it did work for the rest of them. So I mean, that's something. Do you feel you fulfilled your role?
I feel like, as a whole, as props and backstage, I feel like I fulfilled my role. We got all the props completed.
Yes.
We did sourcing, making, a bit of everything. But I also think backstage as well was fulfilled, as in the end everything ran smoothly, and as we said before, anything that went wrong was covered really well, and everything got done well. There wasn't many notes for any of us either after like the first couple of runs, and that was just everyone getting used to everything. So I feel like role-wise, everything was fulfilled.
Yeah. I feel, overall, I think I fulfilled my role pretty well. Because, like you said, we got our props done in time. Even with the late additions to the list from the director in the rehearsal reports, we still managed to get everything completed on time and ready for the dress runs and the shows. In terms of backstage, as I said, I was on the slide panel. I was a slide panel operator, which did sort of go hand in hand with the scene changes majority of the time. And I feel I was able to sort of obviously get a taste of how that was going to run during rehearsals. But I feel once we got into venue and started practicing, I feel like I picked it up pretty quickly and was able to sort of understand how it was going to run pretty quickly. So I feel overall I do believe I was able to fulfill my role pretty well. What about you, Maya?
I think I fulfilled it most probably when we were actually in the theatre. Just keeping up with things like maintenance, steaming things when they got wrinkly, keeping all of the quick changes organised and making sure everybody hung their stuff up and put it away. I think that went quite well, and most of the time it worked and it got everything done. So I think that's a wrap.
Yes, thank you very much.